So my week looks like this: meeting Monday, tactical Tuesday, wide view Wednesday. No, I'm sorry, meeting Monday, task Tuesday, wide view Wednesday, tactical Thursday, and freedom Friday or F it Friday, depending on how the four prior days went. And so for me, part of it, like if you have a scheduled meeting with me, my executive team's calls, sales team review calls, all my regularly scheduled calls, they're all on Monday. And all the tasks, the things that I have to do every week, they're all on Tuesday. And on Wednesday morning, I literally have 2 hours blocked in for Wide View Wednesday. And I look at every week, what is my vision for the organization for the upcoming 12 months? What are the goals that I have broken down by quarter? And how am I doing? And take an honest assessment of that. And I do it every Wednesday.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of From the Trenches, a BMK Vision podcast series. We got Bryan Currier with us today. And Bryan, let me ask you, how did you find yourself in this crazy MSP world?
Oh man, I was trying to pay my way through college. And so really it's all I've ever done. Got involved in it back then, took off, and here we are 25 years later.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so in 25 years, and I know you guys just had a big celebration of your 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you
Yeah.
guys do?
We took the team and their spouses, and we all went on a cruise. So it was a lot of fun. We had a great time.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big accomplishment. And how many people went on that cruise, by the way?
It was right around 100 that came.
That's awesome. One of the things, Bryan, and we've known each other a long time, and I always learn so much from lots of clients, you in particular, and just when it comes to like budgeting for a big event, you have this really cool method for everything you do, whether it's big expenses or big things you want to do in the future. You do this like thing where you're sweeping money on the regular. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we do what's called an annual expense reserve. And then anything beyond that. So the cruise was a good example of that. But usually what I do is I'll take, all right, what are our annual expenses? Things like insurance that's paid annually, software licenses that are renewed annually, um, any big event. And we say, okay, in our case, that's about $200,000 worth of annual things that renew. And so what we do is we take, okay, $200,000, that's a really big check to write. Um, so I break it down on a weekly basis. And we just say, okay, every week we're going to take X amount of dollars. And we literally have our primary checking account, our operations account, and then we have this third account we call reserves. And every week there's a recurring transaction in QuickBooks. It takes, in our case, $4,000 out of the primary checking. It puts it into reserves. The reserves is actually a brokerage account. And we go out and in our case, we buy US Treasuries, and they sit there and it just accumulates interest all year long. And then, when the big check for 20, 30, 40, $50,000 comes, I don't have to think about it. We pull it from reserves and we do that. So we did the same thing with the cruise on a larger scale because it was significantly more expensive. Um, we added it to that weekly transfer. And it was about $1,000 a week that we transferred over 5 years to make
Mhm.
that happen. But when it came time to write the big checks for airfare, cruise fare, things like that, it didn't hurt so much. The money was sitting there.
I think I've kind of twisted that because you showed me that years ago, and I kind of morphed it into I kind of thought that you had like 20 different bank accounts. So you were just sweeping like this goes to that goes to this, but it sounds like you just do one big bucket.
So for annual reserves, we have one big bucket.
Uh-huh.
And of that, like the weekly transfer, for example, is $4,000 that goes into that. But that weekly transfer is actually quite a bit bigger than that. And that reserve account, so there's like 01 is which primary checking, 02 is operations, and 03 is reserves. Underneath that 03, there are, I think, 6 separate accounts. One is annual reserves, and that's what we're talking about. But there's also sales tax reserves. There's income tax reserves. I pay my income tax quarterly, like most of us do. Well, that's a big bill every quarter. So I know what it's going to be. I break it down weekly and then I get to collect interest and I don't have to write that, come up with that big check. It makes it very easy to cash flow and budget. So I think of their income tax reserves, sales tax reserves, annual reserves, Christmas bonus reserves, because we give a large, what's large for me. Uh,
Hmm.
the check we have to write is pretty significant. Uh,
Right.
Christmas bonus reserve. So we just break that out throughout the year. And there's 5 or 6 things that we just budget for and break it down on a weekly basis. So you're correct.
Now, do you just so I put a really get it clear in my head? Do you just have different balance sheet accounts, or do you have separate physical bank accounts?
No, it's all one account at our
Okay,
bank. There's sub accounts inside of QuickBooks that all
I
roll up
got you.
under the main account.
Yeah, that's clever. And you've always been a real champion of treasury management and
Yep,
knowing where your money is.
sure.
A couple of events stick out in my head. One of them is I was visiting you over there in Michigan once, and there was something to do with an account got breached. Maybe like somebody did a Costco transaction, like a fraudulent transaction.
Yeah.
And that's where I think you started really, sharing your history with money. But what was that event? Was that a big deal? I can't remember if that was a big deal or not.
It it was a little deal that turned into a big deal. And fortunately for us, we'd had some safeguards in place. The reason I have 3 checking accounts, the primary operations and reserve, is the primary account can only have money come in. It cannot wire or ACH out. There's no checks associated with it. There's no debit cards or anything like that. It can only bring money in. The operations account can have money go out, and the reserves account does not have any internal or external access. The only thing it can do is transfer money internally. So, to put that in perspective, money comes into we bill credit cards, clients pay us, whatever we do deposits. It comes into that primary account. From there, every week, I get a report from our finance team that says we have X amount of dollars in payables this week, and we keep 20 grand in that account. That's it.
Hmm.
So our maximum exposure on the account that does have checks associated with auto drafts, et cetera, the most our exposure is that 20K.
Right.
And so I get a report on Monday that says we've got, $24,300 worth of payables. We clear our payables every week. And so I get that report on Monday. I'm like, okay, that looks good. And then there's 2 people in the company that can actually move money from that 01 to the 02 account. So I'll move however much payables is, I'll move it from the primary to the secondary. And at that point, they pay all the payables out of that. But if you try and do an ACH auto draft or a wire or a check or anything on that primary account or the reserve account, it just will be declined. There's no method for that to happen. And we had somebody that um, had used, I think it was, there was some fraudulent check and then there were some fraudulent ACH transactions to that operations account. Um, Now, fortunately for us, again, 20 grand's a lot of money, but it's easily caught, easily taken care of. And they didn't affect the other 2 accounts where the bulk of the actual cash lives. So we were able to very quickly just shut it down and say, okay, well, that account's gone. We're going to open a new account. And it was done in a matter of a couple of hours without having to affect, for example, if we were working off one account and I had to shut it down and open a new one, well, now I've got to go to our merchant services and say, no, 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 don't deposit into this account, deposit it into this account. And as you can imagine, that's a real challenge. So merchant services comes in. We do have a couple of things that come out of that primary account. One is payroll, because that's obviously a critical thing. And then like our federal tax payments and whatnot come out of that. But, aside from that, everything comes out of the 02 account, and that just gives you some isolation so that in the event of fraud or even embezzlement, there's not much they can get to. And so we've designed it that way, and it kinda saved us a lot of hassle when that happened.
And when you were first sharing this, and I love that system. When you were first sharing this, that's when you shared with me kind of some events from 15, 20 years ago. Would you mind sharing the story of when you got really nervous for the business? early days?
Yeah, it was right during the Great Recession was the big one. We had a series of events. I won't go into all of the details, but we had some money on a line of credit. We had a few things happen. We had a large client that declared bankruptcy. We had a that owed us a significant amount. We had a partner that had been feeding us leads where the rep we had worked with got fired, and the new rep who came in the background had a ownership in one of my primary competitors. And then we went through an IRS audit. And all of this happened at the same time through the background of the Great Recession. So we quickly found ourselves in a cash crunch, and a pretty significant one where, I mean, we're literally talking, my wife and I are getting ready to sell our house, like that level. And so there were a lot of lessons learned from that. And for me, one of them was, okay, I'm not ever going to be in this position again. And so we introduced as a team what we called the Moving the Mountain campaign, where we were like, listen, guys, we need to pay off all this debt, and we need to have a significant amount of money in the bank, basically where I could make two payrolls if we had no money coming in. So we do a lot on credit cards, right? And if that merchant service takes a hiccup, I would miss payroll. It never happened, but that could theoretically happen. So our goal was, okay, we're going to pay off this debt, and then we're going to make sure, at the time it seemed like an insurmountable amount of money. Our payroll was roughly 50 grand every 2 weeks. So it's like, we want $100,000 in the bank, which seemed like a stupid amount of money at the time. Um, and so that was our big goal. And then going forward, we evaluate on an annual basis, how much does that emergency reserve? By the way, that's another one of those sub accounts, is the emergency reserve. And I committed to my team, 15 years ago at this point, that emergency reserve, we're going to fund it, and that's off limits, even to Brian. That money is there if there's some major catastrophic event, so that we don't have to default to immediately laying people off, or firing people, or missing payroll. And in the 15 years since, I had to use it once. And it was when COVID hit and everything shut down. And everybody was scrambling and laying people off and doing all the stuff, or waiting for their PPP funds. We tapped that, to keep everybody employed, and then we replenished it, as soon as things came back. So that's kind of the story, how that came about, and that's another one of those sub accounts that, it sits there, and we make sure. And the analogy I heard somebody use once is that, your business is this castle that's always under siege by somebody somewhere, whether it's a competitor, the industry, economic situation, political climate, whatever. It's always under siege somehow. And the moat that you have between you and that invading army is a mountain of cash. And so I'm just like, okay, we're not sitting on millions of dollars or anything crazy like that, but it's a principle that we've applied that has served us well now for going on a couple decades.
I love hearing that, and you mentioned, you made a commitment to your employees, and I tell this story of you a lot, probably once a month, to somebody going through something or doing something big, or reconciling the difference between, I want to be profitable. And then they use kind of this like, yeah, but I got to take care of my team. And it's like, well, you can have both. And
Yep.
so one of the stories I tell is, it was about 6, 7, maybe even 8 years ago. You called me and you said, Josh, I'm going to buy this really big thing. I'm going to upgrade from what I have. And I'm going to get this really big thing. And I have it on my wall and I got this plan. And I was like, that sounds sweet, dude. Like, when are you going to do this? And you go, oh, it's probably a year or so away. But one of the things I have to do before I can buy this thing is, everyone over my company needs to make over $50,000. And I was like, oh, dude, that's really sick, because this thing, it serves the business, but it serves your family. And you're like, in order to do this, I got to make sure everyone's, well taken care of. And I was like, "Dude, that's really cool, like, I love that," and I was like, "So how long?" And you said, "Ah, yeah, I think it's about a year." And then it wasn't like 5 weeks later, you called and you said, "Josh, I got the thing." I was like, "Wait, hold on, wait a minute." Like, I said, "But, did you get everyone in place?" "Yeah, I just we'll figure that out later, but I gave everyone the raise and everyone's good." And I was like, "Man, that's, that just in service of others, like, you take care of that and everything else begins to have the framework of taking care of itself." I love that. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I do. I do.
Yes.
That there was a poster. For a while, it lived on the wall right behind me there, and it was a picture of this thing that was a lifetime type of goal, and
Yes, yes.
surrounding it were 10 individual pieces of paper,
That's right,
and
that's right.
and they were it was things like one of them, for example, was a dollar amount MRR.
Yes,
Like, we know what that means, but somebody who was just walking into my office would have no clue what that means. And so it was a bunch of cryptic things, but
yes.
to me, each one of them, and literally, and underneath, there were 10 things at the bottom of this poster. It was like, when they do a fundraiser for United Way or something and you fill
Yeah,
in the thing.
yeah,
And you got into this actually pretty late. That poster probably sat for close to 18 months.
really.
And one at a time, I'd get a marker and I'd X out one of the things. I'd leave it up there, but then I'd fill in that thing across the bottom a little bit. And it was things like a certain level of MRR because I'm not going to go take on this thing. I'm not going to buy this thing unless we have this. Another one at the time was um, offering Blue Cross
Mm,
to our employees at the time, and doing that. Um, and there was a certain amount in that emergency cash reserve wanted to be at a certain level. So I've got a picture of it somewhere in my photo album, but there were 10 things, and that was my big goal, was putting that together. It was fun.
that big goal is so important, and I know we work with our clients a lot on this, where it's you've got to name something, and whether it's, a 10-year goal and getting a certain valuation or selling the business or doing whatever buying this really big thing, without that and without
Right.
that level of planning and what those various pieces of papers were milestones. When
Yeah,
I accomplished this, and each one of those milestones had some version of an initiative beneath it that with either in your head or your
that's
team
right.
knew. And then it just got down to those little action items. What we find, Brian, is that so many of us don't have that map, whether it's on the wall or in the Vision app or in a spreadsheet. We just find ourselves going through the daily tactics of just action item after action item without knowing why we're doing.
Yeah.
You attach so much, emotional capital and just investment in your head of this when I want to do this thing, I want to get this thing. You moved a mountain, man.
Uh, we, um, we moved a mountain.
Yes, yes, y'all
There
did,
was
yeah.
a lot of people behind that. But to your point, like we've all been there, where you're just head down in the business, and we've all heard the phrase, you got to work on the business, not just in the business. We all hear that. One of the practical things that I've done that I learned from somebody, and I've taken it and run with it, is I organize my days and there's time on my calendar. It sounds hokey, but I'll throw it out here anyway for your audience. So my week looks like this: meeting Monday, tactical Tuesday, wide view Wednesday. Um, no, I'm sorry. Meeting Monday, task Tuesday, wide view Wednesday, tactical Thursday, and freedom Friday or F it Friday, depending on how the 4 prior days went. And so for me, part of it, like if you have a scheduled meeting with me, my executive team's calls, sales team review calls, all of my regularly scheduled calls, they're all on Monday. And all the tasks, the things that I have to do every week, they're all on Tuesday. And on Wednesday morning, I literally have 2 hours blocked in for Wide View Wednesday. And I look at every week, what is my vision for the organization for the upcoming 12 months? What are the goals that I have broken down by quarter, and how am I doing? and take an honest assessment of that. And I do it every Wednesday. It was a rhythm taught to me by somebody, and that's been super helpful because sometimes like where I found myself is once you get the thing and the poster comes off the wall, what do we default back to? You default back to the tasks, the daily rhythms, the things like that. You constantly have to have something in front of you, right? To be able to harness that energy, to be able to harness that planning, and to be able to, pursue that vision and to give direction and drive. And so for me, that's a good rhythm to constantly keep whatever that is in front of me and to continually refine and revisit it.
So I love that structure, hokey or whatever. It's awesome. So many people, myself included, we can find ourselves in again that tactic. Now, I used to say, and I think I'm wrong about this. I'm not as right as I once thought I was. Uh, v- we see so many MSPs get stuck at that 2 million mark. Then sometimes we'll see them get stuck at that 5 million mark. And I used to just attribute that to the sales maturity of the owner of the organization where hey, to get from 2 to 5 you've got to be very intentional, bring in sales and marketing help. To get to the above the 5 you have to have mastered that model. The piece I've been missing for years is that strategic planning. I think that's really a big part of it. If what got you to 2 million won't get you to 5, what got you to 5 won't get you to 10, you just kind of inherently through your own study, through just your own personality, you figured so much of that out about blending that strategy and tactical work. Was there real intention to that? Did you have to kind of learn that and practice it to get it right, or did it just come natural to you?
Well, yes to all.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there is just part of the way I'm created and part of my talents and abilities that lend itself to that. Right. I think there's also a continual pursuit to understand and to discover what I don't know. And I think it's actually the rhythm of that, of applying your natural talents along with, engaging with people like you and working systems and going to conferences and reading books and talking with um, various people in the industry and outside of the industry to continually to continually stimulate that internal discussion and that internal dialogue. Right. I was at I have an advisory board meeting, and I was there a couple of weeks ago and just presented, "Hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here's, what I'm thinking for strategy." And these guys really challenged me to think way outside of my assumptions and my comfort zone. And so I think it's everything you just mentioned. It's not an either or, and it's not a singular event. It's an ongoing harnessing of your natural talents and abilities, along with continuing to expand your knowledge to figure out practical times and places to apply that knowledge. For me, that's Wide View Wednesday, where you're constantly revisiting that and giving yourself space and a container to apply those things that you've learned, and to kind of live at your edge and not be afraid to try new things. We're doing an initiative for next year, um, and I'll tell you, it makes me very uncomfortable.
We'll be right back with more. But first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
It's going to push us financially, and like I'm going to invest heavily in it, and yeah, it gives me a little bit of a squirm factor. And I think that's when I'm sitting there and I'm taking that time on Wednesday. One of the questions I ask myself, is there anything on this list that gives me the squirm factor? Because if it doesn't, it's not big enough. And I think that's, finding and living right at your edge, not beyond it, but not too far retracted from it either. That that's what works for me.
That's interesting. When I think about, not to just shamelessly plug our vision system, but when I think about our vision system, one of the things that we struggle with a lot of our clients who are in that kind of 2 to 5 to 7 million range is getting them to articulate what they want. You
Hmm.
ask a lot of people, maybe most people, especially business owners, what do you want?
Right.
They'll almost always tell you what they don't want. They'll
Mm.
start with what they don't want. Well, I don't want to work 24 hours a day. I don't want to get so big that I don't know my clients, whatever the thing is.
Right.
And it can take hours to get them to this place where they're really comfortable saying, I want a house in a nicer neighborhood for my family, or I want,
Hmm.
this boat and I want to go and, go to these islands. It's so hard. But and the point being is, if you don't know what you want, to use kind of a flying analogy, you've taken the plane off. You've made that decision to start a business, and you can spend 20 years just enjoying the view, just
No,
going in circles and sometimes being scared out of your mind, sometimes feeling really confident. But eventually that plane's going to come down and you got to name where you're going to land, on
where are you
airport,
going? Yeah.
off airport. And that's where we try to get with our clients is say, whatever you want, that's the name of the airport you're headed towards. But it's the discomfort that so many people have with naming what they want. That's almost a showstopper. That's why we're 2 or $3 million, I think. What do
Yeah.
you think about that?
Well, I think people sometimes when it comes to really, because what you're talking about is vision casting, right? Like where are we headed, and the why? Because then it begs the question of why you're doing it, right? And the answer isn't just money. Um, I mean, I struggled and struggle with this because it continuously changes, right? Nothing's permanent on that. One of my big ones, if you'd have asked me, 20 years ago when I was 5 years into this, if we were to do that exercise and really get down to it, what I really wanted was freedom. I wanted flexibility and I wanted control of my schedule. I've been married now for maybe 25 years next year. At the time, I had 4 little kids. Um, and for a period of time, I'd go on date night and I'd be the guy who would get an email or a phone call that I would get. My wife will tell you about that. Now, it's not been that way for a long time, but that was one of my big things is I want that freedom. Now, I have that now. I basically have control over my schedule and whatnot. So now it's shifted where what's this next season? What does this look like? And for me, it's really about building sustainability within the organization, making sure that we're resilient, creating opportunities for people on the team, and a next level of financial reward for me and my family. Like I have no problem throwing that in there. That's important to me. I'd like a bigger the next thing at some point,
Mhm.
right? Um, and so I think that part of the challenge is you get so in the day to day and you get so in the, oh, I need to make sure this process works or we close this project or we got to retain this client or, why is ConnectWise reporting broke again? All the things that we don't create space to actually ask those questions. And it is really hard to do that. And I think part of the reason it's hard to do that is because there isn't an immediately um, visible, tangible reward to it. I like dopamine hits of checking things off my task list. And this one's never checked off. It just is a continual. And so I struggle with that a bit. But I think that I think people, when they get in a rhythm of actually just dedicating some time and thinking about it, like you said, really getting down to it, what is it you're really looking for? Then they see the value, and they see the tangible things that come out from that understanding.
Well, you've taken a path, and I kind of feel like all of our businesses are just the vehicle we chose to get us where we want to be. And we could have chosen any vehicle. We could have opened a Subway sandwich. We could have, gotten a W-2 job. We could have started an MSP. So we've already decided this is the vehicle that's going to get us where we want. In that, you also said very specifically, I'm going to serve this one vertical. And whether you did that super intentionally from day zero or not, it's how it's landed is you do one vertical. And I'm a big fan of choosing a vertical, right? That just it you can become an expert in their industry, and get reputation among their peers. So with where you are today, looking back over the past 20 something years, would you have stuck with just one vertical? Because it's obviously done very, very well for you. But would you have, is that anything you would have changed in really mastering the vertical?
So what I would have probably done is, yes, I would have stuck with the vertical approach, but I probably would have found complementary verticals where a shared stack, shared process, same sales process, etc., would complement each other. Um, so, for example, um, right now we're in the dental vertical, which has some very real challenges to it, just because of the technology stack that they use and the business process, workflow, etc. Um, but right now we're in a position where private equity has discovered this space, and the small independent dental practices that have been our lifeblood are getting gobbled up like crazy. Now, there's still plenty of room to run. We're still a dental IT company. This is what we're going to do. But would it be really handy if I had a couple of additional verticals just for a diversification base in case, something like private equity coming in and just ravaging that client base? Yeah, it'd be nice to have that. I would not go so far as to say that I want to become a generalist, because I don't, right? I don't want to be like, oh yeah, you know, we'll do dental practices, and we'll do coffee shops, and we'll do auto dealerships, and we'll do residential, and we'll do churches, and we'll do nonprofits. Like that wouldn't work. Um, but could I say that, hey, I'm going to let's say if I were starting from scratch and we happen to land in law firms, right? Um, would I do law firms and say, "Oh, okay, what CPA firms, which have a very similar stack, look a lot like the law firms, and refer business back and forth and whatnot, where we could have a approach." So I think a still a tight discipline in terms of what verticals, but more than one is probably a wise choice, given how sometimes industry pressures can just hit in an entire vertical and you don't even know until you're knee deep in it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Those complementary verticals and the as I think about you, and I've had this, had a theme of a conversation, probably half a dozen times in the last 3 or 4 weeks with MSPs, in the 7 to 15 million range, and you come to mind because there is this theme that I keep hearing about. Hey, you may not be able to be the traditional MSP 2 and 5 years from now. What is today, everyone kind of agrees it's commoditized in many ways, and it's a race to the bottom. And
Sure.
the things that we do, access and security, are kind of the table stakes. Many of these folks are saying that's just going to have to live over here. We have to get into consultancy and advisory. We've got to start thinking about, what automation we can bring, how to leverage AI with and for our clients. And I'm like, yes, this makes sense. I'm with it. I feel it. It's a tough mountain to move. But then when I think of you, I'm like, well, what's Brian going to do? He's Dennis. I mean, they're in such a fixed rhythm of flow of how they work and the tools they
Yeah.
use and the IT
Yeah.
they use. Does that kind of I don't know what the right word is. Does that kind of exempt you from having to evolve as an
Oh
MSP
God, no,
through advisory and
no,
consultancy?
no. The dental industry, if anything, makes it just as important and more challenging. Um, because for example, most of your clients right now in the typical MSP space, just about everything they're doing now is going to be in a cloud-based platform. So it's managing this. That's not the case in the dental space. I've still got, the guy who takes this 10-year-old sensor, plugs it into a computer to take x-rays in your mouth. There's a lot of physical ancillary devices that limit that and create challenges with that. Um, but on the other hand, a great example is if you go back, I don't know, 7, 8 years, cybersecurity was just starting to become a thing, right? You can remember when this was just, I guess, maybe 10 years at this point. And the natural evolution that we've seen is you have your core stack, and then you have a set of services that, 10 years ago was cybersecurity. Now let's say it's AI, automation, business process enhancement, whatever it may be, right? 5 years ago or 7 years ago, it was the introduction of mobility, mobile devices and whatnot. The iPhone exploded on the market. All of a sudden that became a thing, and tablets, like bring your own device, all these things. What we found is you've got this core stack, and then you've got these leading edge services that for us, it's like this is inclusive with our MSP plan, and this is on demand as you need it. And then what will happen over time as markets mature is things will move from this enhancement stack into the core stack, right? So for us, we started out, we had our core stack, your typical IT management, et cetera. And then we introduced what we called the advanced security platform, ASP, right? And so that included things like endpoint protection. This is back in the days where everybody just had an antivirus and that was it. Well, now you introduce a tool like Huntress or Sentinel One or something like that. And that became part of the advanced security platform, and it was an optional add on. And then about 6 years ago, we reevaluated again and we said, okay, the ASP is now part of the core stack. Every single client is getting this. It's now mandatory, right? They're all getting this firewall, this switch, this Wi-Fi infrastructure, this endpoint protection, this backup solution. BDRs or virtualization is another great example. At one point, it was this additional thing that would be nice to have, or it may be a fit, and ultimately it became this is the standard. And I think you're going to see just this continual evolution in every space where you've got your core stack, you've got these leading edge things, and then over time, some of these leading edge things will become part of your core stack, and some of these edge things will just go away or become a very fringe offering. VDI. Remember VDI? Everything was supposed to be VDI by now. I don't think I have anybody that uses VDI. Why? Because it doesn't really fit. So it was this fringe thing for a while. VDI and the ASP were both introduced for us. So advanced security and VDI became these advanced bolt-ons to our core stack. And ultimately what happened? The ASP became part of the core stack, and VDI became shelved to the back corners of history and Reddit.
Hmm. Right, 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 right. So as you think about kind of like the business process automation, just as an example, I get really excited about services like Process Plan. I just sat through a really cool demo, or what Thread is doing. Like these are really cool, and I think that first stop that we make it maybe in this era or stage that we're in is how do I use it in my MSP in my business,
Yeah.
and then that can just take years to kind of feel like, oh, we understand it. We're doing something different than we did a couple years ago. I'm just not seeing that immediate rush to go out and bring it to, our clients, the MSPs clients, to say, how do we start bringing this technology to them, monetizing it, diversifying, and putting the, traditional MSP tasks, to just the table stakes. How are you viewing the MSP's obligation or opportunity to go and bring that type of advancement to your clients?
Yeah. So a great example of this is, and we're literally in the middle of this project right now. We had a software platform that we use for all of our internal processes and procedures, our knowledge base, everything like this, right? And it was expensive. The stupid thing was like 20, 30 grand a year for us or something like that. And I looked at it and I'm like, I'm pretty sure we could build something that's much simpler in SharePoint. And if we do it right, we could do this. And so, and save us a bunch of money and go out and configure this whole thing and not have to have this third party tool and use the core part of the Microsoft 365 stack that we use and that a lot of our clients use. And so we're in that process right now, right? We took all of our processes and we're reframing them. We're putting them in SharePoint. We're doing it the a right way that is not only applicable to us, but that I could replicate to a client and have a lot of value to a client. And so that ability to maybe do some consulting with a client on that based on, hey, here's what we went through. Here's how we could make it look for you. And then layer on some advanced services even on top of that. So, for example, one of the things we're doing is deploying a Copilot agent, the Advantage Technologies Library Access System or Atlas. Isn't that creative? Like I'm
That's
very
pretty
proud of
good. That's
that.
pretty
So give
good.
me
That's
give me
pretty
a gold
good.
star there. Right. So we're putting together. It's like, all right, there's this SharePoint library. That's the core technology that's part of Microsoft 365. Everybody has it. We support it. I would say it's part of that core stack. Right. But what is not part of that core stack is the advanced services built on it. Of we can help you guide you through taking all of your processes, create templates for you, put it in a SharePoint library and walk you through how we did it. And that's not part of that core stack. That's an additional thing, right? It enforces the reliance on our core stack, that support for that SharePoint platform. And then we can get really creative with it and we can bring in really cutting edge technologies like Copilot agents so that when an employee has a question about what's what's HR's policy regarding paid time off, instead of having to dig through a SharePoint library, they just ask Copilot and Copilot responds in a natural language
That's
query citing the document. So that's an example of what we're doing. And that is a great example of what Wide View Wednesday is about.
mhm.
Because that's where for me, that's where that came from. So I'm looking at it saying, I can't be the only one that's paying for a tool like this that I think I could really go without if we were intentional. Then we could create this platform and then we could build this in. And then we could talk to our clients about doing the exact same thing we just did ourselves. Because guess what? They don't want to spend 30 grand a year for a document management library system either when they already have SharePoint. The issue is we're not SharePoint developers. We're not SharePoint experts. That's not what we do, but we can partner with people who do, and we can figure this out and we can bring a lot of value that way. So to me, that all comes from that taking a step back from the day to day and looking at the business as a whole and looking at my client's business as a whole, saying, what can we do to maybe figure this out ourselves so that we could not only benefit us, but roll it out to our clients too?
So, the blocker that I hear, because you've taken a really creative twist on it, and I think a lot of people have are at various stages of that journey that you just articulated really well. And this is my view. It doesn't have to be anyone else's view. I think it's, somewhat controversial. Is I think as MSPs, there's so much addiction to their shitty recurring revenue. Recurring revenue is awesome. Shitty recurring revenue is shitty recurring revenue. You don't know the profitability. Your effective hourly rate is trash. There's just so much addiction to it that when we start thinking about this project where you've built this amazing thing for yourself around SharePoint and Copilot, and it solves a real business need on the client, I think where a lot of MSPs are blocked or will be blocked is, yeah, but how do I get recurring revenue out of it? And until they feel like somebody's shown them a really great model, they're just going to kind of stall out. Do you have a view or a vision on, hey, it's okay to do that as a project? It's okay to do a bunch of that type of work in the next year or so without figuring out how to recurring it. What
Well,
is your thought there?
yeah, my two things on that. Number one, you probably heard me say that this supports this, right? That they need this in order for us to be able to effectively do this. So if you're not on if you don't have what we call Advantage 360, our IT management platform, if you don't have that, I can't help you with this, right? And so for me, it viewing some of this project work reinforces the value of why this is here. And so that's how I look at it internally. And the boundary that we kind of put in place is we made this change probably about 10 years ago. We don't do project work unless you're going to be on an MSP agreement. You're either doing it as a function of your managed service agreement or you're doing it to come on board with a managed service agreement. But if you were to come to me and say, hey, we're going to give you all this money to do this and this and this and this, but we have no interest in your managed service agreement, um, we'll decline. We don't do that. And so I think that the trick is to looking at it as an extension of the recurring revenue, keeping in mind that ultimately some of those things that right now are outliers or project or maybe an enhancement or whatever, ultimately you may take that just like we did with the advanced security platform and roll it into that recurring revenue as the market changes and matures and it becomes more of a standard. Or you may leave it as a project, but either way, it all flows from that core agreement.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think where so many folks start feeling that uneasiness or queasiness is, hey, we struggle with projects as it is. The projects are in our wheelhouse of, doing an upgrade or a migration or whatever it may be, that their
Yeah.
confidence level there doesn't always feel great. And then taking on this, hey, there's this business process, project that feels really scary. One of the things that I think helps them feel that scared feeling is who's going to do it. If I put Courier out there, he's going to figure it out and do awesome. If I put a lot of owners of MSPs out there, they're going to figure it out and do awesome. What are you kind of seeing as we start winding down here? What are you seeing the future employees of Advantage being, in another couple few years?
Yeah.
What do they
S-
look like?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Part of that thing that scares me that I talked about for next year is us embracing some of this and answering that exact question. I don't have any SharePoint developers on staff. So, what did we do when we needed help with this? And I'm not a SharePoint developer. I'm not a coder. Um, but we found a partner that we could leverage and bring in to help us. And one of the stipulations to work with us on our internal project was, look, ultimately, I would like to be able to utilize you as our SharePoint resource that we present to our clients. And I'm going to pay you X amount. I'm going to mark it up 10% or whatever. And they're going to have it as part of this overall relationship with Advantage. But I leverage an AI developer, a Copilot, or a SharePoint developer, a web apps developer. Same thing. We're developing it internally, using this person, and then we develop that relationship, and they become attached to our team as somebody like a general contractor who's got his favorite electrician,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, I personally do not believe. I know for me, I do not have the resources to be able to acquire and retain that level of talent for all of those various specialties. So, what I think my team is going to look like for the future is W-2 full-time employees are the ones that have this core stack. Um, Sales, client care, marketing, engineers, all, project, all of it, right? Those are full-time W-2 employees. We bring on a SharePoint project. Then I'm the general contractor who has his electrician. Still goes on my paper. I'm still responsible for it. I'm still going to interface with them. And I'm going to make some money on what the SharePoint developer does and what the web app developer does and what the Copilot developer does. Um, until it reaches a point where, okay, I need a full-time guy, at least one, and I can reliably predict that I'm going to need them for a long period of time. Prior to that, I'm going to partner, and that's part of my strategic plan for this. And I don't see that changing. So the core team is the core project,
Yeah.
and partners for the outliers.
So I'm with you on that, the technology component of being an expert in the tools that are necessary to make this thing happen. I
Yeah.
wonder about that that first conversation with the client or the prospect about, hey, we also do this, or this is next level of utilizing technology. And then that person who's kind of gathering and having the conversation saying, hey, show me how you do invoicing, show me how you do whatever the process is, and translating that for that SharePoint expert. That's the part I get a little stuck in, is what does that employee look like?
Don't
Have you
know.
Yeah, right? I don't know
Yeah,
either. Right.
figuring that. I mean, my gut tells me it's what you would refer to as the account managers. We call them client relationship specialists, where they're really wanting to understand the business, understand the processes, and be willing to tease out, hey, we have this option if you could see value to this, if you think this is something that would be helpful to you. Um, I think they're the ones that would have to lead the fight on that, and then it becomes, how do you compensate them for that? What is it just part of their your core remit, or do you put some sort of commission on? Like all those variables. Um,
That's right.
but I think it's whoever has the strongest relationship.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's the strongest relationship for sure, and just that acumen to have, a next level business conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
Yeah.
good stuff. Brian, man, I'm so glad this worked out that we got to meet here today. You're just a wealth of knowledge as always. Where can people go out and find you out in the world, Brian?
Oh, they can. I think I'm not huge on social media other than LinkedIn. If you search for LinkedIn, Bryan Currier, you can reach me there. Email if you guys have any questions, feel free, Brian at adv-tech.com. Feel free to throw that out there, and I'm always game to respond to people and to support the my fellow travelers on this wild ride of MSP land. And yeah, those are probably the two best ways to reach me is email and LinkedIn. And special thanks to you. I know you guys do amazing stuff. We've worked together for many years, and we've worked on your vision platform, and I've seen the iterations of that kind of be built, and even know the backstory behind it and some of the triumphs and the tragedies along the way. And it's a really neat thing. It's a really impressive system that can help bring some clarity and vision to other people. And I wish I'd had it 20 years ago. So I appreciate you and everything that your team does.
Yeah, right on, Brian. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. Well, listen, go have a great rest of your week, and we'll check in soon. Everyone else, if we earned it, give us a like, a share, a subscribe. It means a lot, and have a great week. Bye.